everybody, it's Terry with Crafty Book Nerd here today to talk about the books I read for the month of January 2026. But first, you know what time it is. Time for our quote of the day. And today's quote says, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." And that's our quote for the day. So let's talk about January. January was a great month for me. I read 11 total books, and I was able to read the books I had planned on reading, so that was exciting. Out of those 11 books, my average rating was 3.8. I had 5 thrillers, 2 contemporary, a middle grade, a memoir, a fantasy, and a romance. As you can see, I'm still leaning toward thrillers, but I am reading a few other genres as well. So I want to start with the NetGalley books that I read. One of my goals for the year is to get my NetGalley rating up, and I think I started at 20% and I'm up to 30% now, so that's really good. My goal is to get it to 50% by the end of the year. So let's start with those NetGalley books. And most of these books I do not have because they either were NetGalley, which means they were an ebook, or they were a library book, or they were an audio book. I actually only own 2 of the 11 books that I read this month. So the first one was You'll Never Forget Me by Ayesha Raya. This is a story about Dimple, who is a struggling actress. She gets her big break when her competition accidentally falls down the stairs. So now Dimple thinks that everything is going to get better for her. But unfortunately for her, the family hires a private investigator to investigate what happened to their daughter. So as they go through investigating, we learn some interesting information. I did find that the book moved kind of slow. There were a few surprises and twists, but at times I was kind of bored. But I did stick it out. I finished it reading. It was okay, and I gave it 3 stars. The next book from NetGalley, The Only One Who Knows by Lisa M. Matlin. It's a picture of the cover. This book has a great premise to it. About an out-of-work journalist who goes to her hometown and bodies start showing up, and she teams up with another journalist and they begin to investigate to try to figure out what's going on. We learn about old friendships, there are secrets, there are past relationships, and all those things are brought to the surface as they begin to investigate the bodies that are turning up in their town. At times I was confused, as it seemed some of the events jumped around too much for me. It was kind of creepy with the shark aspect of the book and all the different secrets, but it was still a solid 3-star for me, and that's The Only One Who Knows. The next NetGalley is The Fabled Earth by Kimberly Brock. My favorite thing about this book was the writing. The writing was very descriptive, and there were a lot of descriptive parts in the book that described the environment and the scenery, and it was very well done. This book follows 3 women, and there are 2 different timelines, and I'm always a sucker for a book with dual timelines, and so this one sucked me in. It was slow. I seem to like fast-paced books, and this was not fast-paced. It was slow, and I almost gave up reading it, but I became so invested in the 3 women and their stories, and I wanted to find out what happened to them. And I was very satisfied with the ending of the book, and I enjoyed it very much. I gave it 3 stars, and it talks about family, racism, Southern folklore, and a bit of mystery and magic mixed in. So overall, it was a good read. The next NetGalley book, Keep Your Friends Close by Joanna Rhine. About 2 best friends who've been best friends since they were 12 years old. Now they're adults. Mia is a little better off than her friend Carrie, and so Carrie lives with Mia. Mia lets her stay with her because she wants to help her friend out. However, they both have secrets that they're not sharing with each other. And even though this was advertised as a thriller, it felt more like a mystery to me. It was predictable, and I thought I had it figured out, and there were parts of it that I did have figured out, but the ending surprised me very much, and I did like that twist at the ending, and so that made it a good 3-star book for me. So those were the NetGalley books I read. The next book I read was a book of the month, Everything We Didn't Say, and I've had this one since October of 2021, and so I'm very happy to have read it. And it is by Nicole Bart, Everything We Didn't Say. Another book with a dual timeline, another book with family secrets. And it's interesting because this is also another book where a young lady named Juniper, after 15 years of being in exile, has returned to her hometown to help a friend who has a library. There are some complicated relationships in this book, and it was very slow burning, and the ending was definitely a surprise, and I did enjoy it, but I will probably unhaul this book. All right, the next one was a middle school book, and I don't remember who recommended this, and I didn't get to it in middle grade March, and so I've been thinking about it, and I put it on hold at the library, and I got it, so I decided let me go ahead and read that one, and that's Tree Table Book by Lois Lowry, an author that I adore. In this book, we meet a little girl who is 11 years old, and her name is Sophie. And at the beginning of the book, Sophie gives us 3 words to remember, and she says, listen carefully. These will be important later on. And as you read the book and you get to the end, you discover why those 3 words were so important. Sophie is kind of a loner. She does not have many friends at school. They make fun of her because she wears glasses, and she just is kind of a loner. But she does have a best friend, and her best friend is her elderly neighbor who is 88 years old, who happens to also have the name of Sophie. And they develop a very special relationship. The little girl Sophie goes over there to visit the elderly Sophie, and they play cards, and they play games, and they have snacks together, and they just develop a special bond. And the little girl Sophie is very interested in the older lady's life, and how she got to live in this neighborhood, what her background was like. And so the older lady Sophie begins to tell the little girl stories of her life. And it just so happens that the older lady Sophie, who is 88, has a little bit of dementia. And she tells stories to Sophie about her life in Poland during the Holocaust. And because she tells it to her in the form of a story, it's not quite as scary, I guess you could say. We learn a lot about Poland and what was going on during that time of World War II. And what this book did for me is it reminds me of how important stories are, especially from our elders. Like, I think about my grandmother and stories she told me, and I wish I would have recorded those, or I wish I would have written them down, because once that person is gone, a lot of times the stories are gone with them. This story was heartwarming and heartbreaking all at the same time. I gave it 4 stars. The next one was Queen Charlotte by Julia Quinn and Shonda Rhimes. And of course, the show Bridgerton is based on these series of books. This was an ebook. And I did watch some of Bridgerton, but I never kept up with the seasons that I wanted to. But then I discovered the book series, and I said, oh, I think I would like to try that. So I did read the first one, really enjoyed it, and I will continue on with the next books. So this is a novelization of the TV drama, and it's about Queen Charlotte and King George and how they meet and how it links into the whole Bridgerton series. So Queen Charlotte is promised to King George, and she is not happy about it. She does not want to marry someone she doesn't know, she doesn't love, she hasn't even met him yet. She did, however, meet his mother, her future mother-in-law, and that just really set her off. She just was like, I just don't think I can do this, and she is not happy. Well, the wedding does take place, and then things in their relationship get very interesting. Does it have a happy ending? Well, you're going to have to read the book to find out. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 4 stars. My next one is the other book that I had the physical copy of, and this was a book of the month that I got recently. I think it was just last month, might have been in January, maybe, I can't remember. And that's My Husband's Wife by Alice Feeney. I've read many books by Alice Feeney, and I have enjoyed most of all the books I read, and this one did not disappoint. And like I said, it was one of my most anticipated books for 2026. It was a very fast-paced psychological thriller that's going to keep you guessing till the very end. In fact, when I got to the end of the book, I was like, wait a minute, what happened? I had to go back and reread parts of it to get it in my head about what happened to who and where everybody was at the end of the story, because it was a bit confusing. So what we have is we have one house, one husband, 2 women, and one of them is lying. Eden, who is an artist, returns home one evening, and guess what? Her key will not open the door. And a woman appears at the door who looks a little bit like she does. And the man standing behind the woman at the door is Eden's husband. And so she says, hey, it's me, your wife. And he's like, I don't know you, lady. This is my wife here. Well, that had me hooked because I'm thinking, okay, what's going on here? We got a twin situation or what is happening? So, are you intrigued? I was. It gets more interesting as it goes on. And no matter what you think you know or what you think is happening, you better think again, because nothing in this book is as it seems. I gave it 4 stars because there were a few parts that I said were confusing, and I did have to go back and do a little bit of rereading to clarify things in my head. But if you like Alice Feeney, you like a good fast-paced psychological thriller, check this one out, My Husband's Wife. Now I want to talk about some of my 5-star books. The first one I want to talk about is Becoming by Michelle Obama. One of my good friends listened to this on audio, and she said, Terry, you have to listen to it on audio because Michelle tells her story. And I did. And it was fantastic. That's all I can say. It was fantastic. We learned about Michelle and her upbringing. We learned about Barack and his upbringing. We learned about how they met, about their relationship, about how he got into political office, how things were when he was running for senator. We learned about their infertility problems and having children and how that played into everything. You get a behind-scene look at what was going on with her during the presidential election, and then we get to see her after Barack is elected and how she deals with being the first lady and all the things that go into it, things I never even thought of. It was just so interesting, and it was just, you could tell she was telling her story from her heart, and I just enjoyed it so very much. I was captivated from the very first chapter, and if you don't listen to any other audiobook this year, you need to check this one out. It was so good. The next one was The Memory Library by Kate Story. And this is for my Book Girls Challenge that I do, that I started last year, and I'm doing it again this year. It has everything to do with books. And so this is a book, one that takes place in a library. This book is about Sally Harris. And Sally has been building a library in her home for 42 years. And she adds a new book every year on her daughter's birthday with a note in it. Ella, who is Sally's only child, fled to Australia 20 years ago because there was some kind of exchange with her mother, and so she just left. And she never looked back. But a disaster strikes, and Ella's forced to go home, where she takes a journey through the books and the letters and the clues and learns about her mother and things that went on that she was not aware of. It's a story of hope, friendship, and second chances. If you're like me, You love to read books, and you love books about books. And that's what the Midnight Library is, a book about the love of books. It's a 5-star read for me. And the last one was a book that I never heard of, never been on my radar, but the same friend who recommended Michelle Obama, my friend Brenda, heard about this fantasy book, and she doesn't even read fantasy books, but she read the premise and she said, Terry, I'm going to check this book out, and I think you should too. So we kind of did a buddy read on it, and that is For Whom the Bell, B-E-L-L-E, Tolls by Jasiah Lynn. It is a fantasy, and it was very good. I do want to give you some content warnings on this book. It is not for everybody, okay? There are discussions in the book about child molestation and abuse. There's some religious trauma in the book. There's also depictions of battle, gore, and violence, and there's also some sexual content, and I would consider it kind of spicy, okay? So Lily has died, and she has been told that she is going to hell, okay? Well, she goes to hell, but it's on her own terms. When she first arrives, she can't believe what she's seeing. There's a deli. There's a coffee store. What is this place? She is assigned to work in customer service, where her job is to help souls find their rightful circles within hell. So within this book, you have different levels of hell. And in the end pages of the book, there's a really cool map that shows you the different levels of hell. And depending on what you've done that got you to hell, then there's different degrees of different levels that you're going to be placed in. And that's her job, is to help them find those different levels. It's a really hard book to describe. It was over 600 pages. But I never felt like it was 600 pages. I just flew through it. I loved the fantasy. I loved, there was like magic involved in here. The world was something that you just could not imagine. And it was funny. I laughed out loud many times. And it kind of makes you think, hey, maybe hell's not such a bad place. Because it just depicts it in such a way that makes you think that. I mean, after all, they have a coffee shop, right? What can be wrong with a place that has a coffee shop, okay? But I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 stars. So there you have it, my books that I read for January. In my next video coming up, you will be seeing the books I plan to read for February. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a subscriber. If you're new here, I would love to have you join my channel where I talk about everything books, and I do a little bit of crafting on the side. Thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon or evening or morning or whatever time of the day it is when you watch this video. God bless.